Joining us now is Mark Hamrick from Bankrate. Talked a little bit about a survey on American consumers and how they're feeling about tariffs and just the state of the economy generally. Mark, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you, Mike.
So, obvious change in administration, January of this year, and I'm interested to hear, you guys ask this question over and over. When you ask Americans how they're feeling about the state and direction of the economy, how has that changed over the course of the last, 6 to 8 months?
I find this fascinating, Mike, and obviously I have a lot invested, so to speak, in the surveys we do, and I've resided in the Washington, D.C. area for about 4 decades. So, we are comfortably located outside the Beltway for what it's worth, where I do my work. But I think there's a part of this won't surprise people, and then I think there's a part of it that if you really bury your head in the details of it, ends up being shocking. And that is that 56% of Americans believe that the economy is on the wrong track. Okay. That's almost exactly what we found a year ago. But once you get beneath that headline number, it's the people who believe that has changed dramatically, broadly speaking. And what the difference is was last year, those that thought things were going to wherever in a handbasket were Republicans. This year, it goes completely the opposite. So we have Democrats who feel that way versus Republicans who are relatively confident. But I would say overall, we did see fewer people who think the economy is on the right track. But I do find it amazing because obviously there's a lot at stake with the policy that any president and to the degree that they're engaged, elected officials on Capitol Hill agree to. But, you could sit back and say, well, how much about my personal life and even the broader economy has changed in 12 months? We know the risks are different. The sort of inputs with respect to policy are different. But has the economy really changed that much? And I think ultimately that's what I find most amazing about this kind of survey work.
Yeah, I find it remarkable and also a bit unsurprising given just that we see this reflected elsewhere. I remember looking at inflation expectations, for example, literally flipping after the election while staying at pretty much the same overall level. It's just Democrats thought that the inflation would be a lot worse. Republicans thought it would be a lot better. When you dive into these big...
Can I just stop you on that for a second, Mike?
Please, yeah.
The one thing University of Michigan survey people tell us is that on the tariffs, there is broader agreement than you might think. And so on the Bankrate survey, for example, 65% of Americans believe that tariffs will have a negative impact on their personal finances. 18%, so fewer than 1 in 5 say it would be positive, and then 7% say no impact, and 10% say they don't know. I think maybe the last 10% are among the more honest. But I think that there's actually more of a universal take on the tariffs than there might have been on, let's say, overblown federal spending, where, that's actually been something that both parties have been enabling.
That's one piece that I have found interesting is just, in my mind, how well Americans have perceived the realities of tariffs, of driving prices higher and who exactly pays for them, given all the misinformation that's been out there. What did you find in terms of, did you find, I guess, a big partisan divide on feelings about tariffs and how it's going to impact people's finances?
Well, let's, I would say less so than we might have guessed. And so, for example, for those that believe tariffs will have a negative impact on their personal finances, essentially you had 9 of 10 Democrats feeling that way. And yet you had nearly half of Republicans feeling that way. And 62% of independents. I think part of the problem with political identification these days is I feel like this would have been one of those old Saturday morning multiplication rock derivatives where it'd be like, what is a Republican, right? It's like, it's not what your grandfather used to be if your grandfather was a Republican. And the same's true to some, but to a lesser degree with respect to the people who identify as Democrats, think Joe Biden versus Bernie Sanders, right? So, I guess people are still wearing the political jerseys in the stands, but perhaps as with so much of our society, the gulf that divides those who have different opinions about a variety of things has widened.
Mark, last quick question here. I know when I think about tariffs and the potential benefit that has been touted, it's to the
Yeah.
labor market and manufacturing. And so I think of a potential benefit to future generations from that. What did you find in terms of age changes and their views on tariffs? Because I hesitate to find a whole lot of benefits, for instance, to a 70-year-old who's already retired when it comes to jobs coming back to the U.S.
Well, I would say broadly that our survey found that people who are younger are less optimistic,
Mm.
right? And so part of that has to do with the fact that um, those who are more established with their personal finances are less concerned and probably feel like they can weather the proverbial storm a little bit better. And I think that probably is among the more significant takeaways from the survey in general.
Mark Hamrick from Bankrate joining us today to talk about their survey of Americans' finances and their personal views on tariffs. Thanks so much for joining us, Mark. Really great study. Appreciate it. And we'll talk to you again soon.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.